History is rarely a straight line. We tend to think of progress as a linear path, where old technologies slowly fade away, gracefully making room for the new. But every so often, a machine arrives that disrupts this narrative. A machine that appears not as a relic of a dying age, but as a glimpse of an impossible future. This is the story of the British Railways Class 9F. Built in the shadow of World War II, at the exact moment the world was pivoting aggressively toward diesel and electric power, Britain decided to do something counterintuitive. They ordered the construction of their most ambitious, most colossal steam locomotive ever. These weren't just engines, they were masterpieces of thermodynamics and mechanical engineering. They were powerful, they were efficient, and they were scientifically advanced. And yet, within a single decade, these record-breaking giants were swept aside. Why did Britain build the ultimate steam engine just to destroy it? Was it a mistake, a failure of planning, or was it a final, defiant roar of an industry that refused to go quietly? To find the answer, we have to look beyond the cold steel and into the story of technical brilliance, economic necessity, and the tragic timing that defined the short life of Britain's final steam giants. Part 1. The Post-War Crossroads. To understand why the 9F exists, you first have to understand the landscape of Britain in the early 1950s. The war was over, but the scars remained. The nation was rebuilding, and the economy was hungry. The demand for coal, steel, and raw minerals was immense. The entire country relied on a railway network that had been battered by years of wartime overuse and chronic undermaintenance. The railways were the circulatory system of the British economy, and that system was struggling to keep the blood pumping. At the executive level, the British Transport Commission was looking at the horizon. They saw the future in diesel and electrification. To them, steam was dirty, labor-intensive, and a relic of the Victorian past. They wanted it gone. However, inside the design offices, a more pragmatic calculation was taking hold. The executives might have wanted a diesel revolution, but the technology wasn't ready for mass deployment. The infrastructure wasn't there. But the freight demands, they were immediate. The railway didn't need a futuristic dream. It needed a workhorse. It needed something rugged, reliable, and capable of hauling 900 tons of coal at a steady 35 miles per hour, day after day, across the country's steepest and longest routes. This specific set of circumstances created a unique window of opportunity for a man named Robert Riddles. Riddles was the chief mechanical engineer, a veteran of wartime production and a staunch advocate for the potential of steam. With the backing of colleagues like L.P. Parker, Riddles argued for one final push. He didn't want a stopgap measure. He didn't want a good enough engine to hold the line until the diesels arrived. He wanted a culmination. He envisioned a standard heavy freight locomotive that would embody everything British engineers had learned over a century of steam development. He wanted to build the best there ever was. Part 2. Engineering the ultimate beast. The mandate given to Riddles and his team was a paradox. They were asked to create a locomotive more powerful than anything before it, yet it had to be economical on coal and easy to maintain. It had to be massive, yet it had to fit within Britain's notoriously tight loading gauges and clearances. The first major battle was the design itself. Committee minutes from 1951 reveal intense debates over the wheel arrangement. Riddles initially considered a 282 configuration, but drawing on his experience with the wartime austerity engines, he pushed for something bolder, a longer 10-coupled wheelbase. The result was the 10-2-0 configuration. Picture this: 2 leading wheels at the front to guide the engine into curves, followed by 10 massive driving wheels biting into the rail, and 0 trailing wheels behind the cab. This arrangement was unique among the British Railway standard classes. Those 10 driving wheels provided exceptional traction, vital for heavy mineral trains starting on slick rails, while spreading the weight out to maintain a low axle load. This meant the giant engine could run on a wide variety of tracks, not just the reinforced main lines. But this size created a dangerous physical problem. The Class 9F stretched over a rigid wheelbase of nearly 22 feet. On a straight track, this was fine, but on the winding mineral lines of the Northeast or the twisting gradients of the Somerset and Dorset, a rigid steel frame of that length is a recipe for disaster. It would bind against the rails, potentially tearing up the track or causing a derailment. The solution the engineers found was a subtle masterstroke. The design team machined the center driving wheels without flanges. This effectively allowed the middle of the wheelbase to slide laterally across the railhead. Furthermore, the flanges on the second and fourth axles were reduced. This combination of flangeless and reduced flange wheels allowed this massive rigid frame to negotiate curves as tight as 400 feet in radius. It was a compromise that balanced brute strength with delicate engineering, enabling the giant engine to operate on the country's oldest, most restrictive tracks without fighting the rails. Part 3. Power and Efficiency. Beneath the boiler cladding, the 9F was a machine designed for sustained power. The engineers knew that high-grade coal was becoming scarce in the post-war economy, so they gave the 9F a firebox that was wider than any previous standard class, specifically designed to burn low-grade, dusty coal with maximum effectiveness. It was a beast with a cast-iron stomach. A large superheater was installed to extract extra energy from the exhaust, feeding drier, hotter steam to the cylinders. Pressed to 250 pounds per square inch, the locomotive could develop a tractive effort of nearly 40,000 pounds. But these numbers weren't just for headlines, they were tuned for economical running. The wide grates and efficient drafting meant the engine could haul heavy loads over long distances with fewer stops for water or fire cleaning. The crews, the men who actually had to operate these machines, loved them. Firemen appreciated the 9F because, despite its massive size, it steamed freely. It didn't fight you. Drivers noted that on heavy iron ore trains, where lesser engines would slip and struggle for grip, the 9F felt sure-footed. It was a machine that inspired confidence. Part 4. The Spaceships in Service. Production began in 1954, split between the famous railway works of Crewe and Swindon. In total, 251 of these engines were built, numbered 92000 to 92250. When they hit the tracks, they looked like nothing else. The high running plate exposed the wheels in motion, giving them a skeletal, functional look. The sheer height of the boiler made them tower over older engines. The crews quickly dubbed them Spaceships. They were alien, they were huge, and they were undeniably effective. The 9F was designed for a specific life, the slow, relentless rhythm of hauling mineral trains at 35 miles per hour through the night. But the machine possessed a secret capability that no one had officially asked for. There are well-attested accounts of these heavy freight engines being pressed into emergency passenger service during shortages or disruptions. In these moments, the 9F defied the laws of physics. You have to remember, these engines had small driving wheels optimized for torque, not speed. They had plain bearings that were never designed for high rotational stress. And yet, there are records of 9Fs exceeding 90 miles per hour. Imagine the scene, a freight engine built for the slow crawl of coal delivery, thundering down the main line at express speeds. Drivers describe the experience with a mix of exhilaration and terror. One retired driver recalled, "She ran so smooth you would hardly believe the speed. No sway, no drama, just a deep, steady thunder." This stability at high speed was the ultimate testament to the precision balancing of the running gear. The 9F was a machine built with a safety margin far beyond its specifications. It was better than it ever needed to be. Part 5. The Premature End. However, engineering brilliance cannot always overcome political reality. The tragedy of the Class 9F lies in its lifespan. This fleet was built to serve for 30, maybe 40 years, but the 1955 Modernization Plan accelerated the shift to diesel and electric traction much faster than Robert Riddles or his team had anticipated. The writing was on the wall. The most poignant symbol of this era was locomotive number 92220, named Evening Star. Completed in Swindon in March 1960, she was the last steam locomotive ever built by British Railways. Unlike her hard-working sisters, she was painted in passenger green with a copper-capped chimney and treated as a living monument from the day she was born. She was a celebration of the steam era, a commemorative object, yet her very existence was an elegy. She was the final period at the end of a long sentence. Within just 8 years of her construction, the entire class was withdrawn. Think about the economics of that. These machines cost around £33,500 each to build, a fortune at the time. They were mechanically nearly perfect. They were barely broken in, and yet they were swept aside by policy. They were not retired because they failed. They were retired because the world had changed around them. By 1968, steam on British railways was dead, and the 9Fs were sent to the scrapyard. Part 6. Legacy and Resurrection. If the story ended there, it would be a pure tragedy, but the sheer impressiveness of the Class 9F ensured that they would not be forgotten. While hundreds were cut up for scrap, preservation societies and volunteers fought to save a handful of these giants. They refused to let the spaceships fade into silence. Take, for example, number 92203, known as Black Prince. In 1982, on a heritage line, this survivor proved the enduring power of the class by hauling a train weighing over 2,178 tons. That is a feat unmatched by any preserved steam locomotive to this day. It was a reminder of the raw power that had been thrown away. Or look at number 92134. After being rescued from a scrapyard and undergoing years of painstaking restoration, this engine found new fame in 2023, appearing on the silver screen in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Even decades later, when Hollywood needs a symbol of unstoppable power, they turn to the 9F. Conclusion. The story of the Class 9F is a complex study of technological obsolescence. It forces us to ask a difficult question. Was it a waste to build them? From a purely financial standpoint, retiring a fleet of brand new, high-efficiency machines after less than a decade seems like a catastrophic loss, a failure of foresight. But history is rarely that simple. For the brief time they ran, the 9Fs kept Britain's industrial heart beating during a critical transition period. They did the heavy lifting that the early diesels simply couldn't handle. The Class 9F remains a physical testament to British engineering confidence. It was a machine that arrived too late to save the steam age, but it arrived just in time to show us exactly what that age was capable of. As the narrator of the original story observed, sometimes what is left behind tells us more about ourselves than what we choose to build next. The Class 9F was the ultimate expression of the steam locomotive, powerful, adaptable, and majestic. It was a giant that was cut short, not by its own limitations, but by the relentless, unyielding march of time.